Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into the sweeping mythic origins of, well, the absolute greatest conflict in all of fantasy lore. Today, we're focusing on the foundational events of Middle-earth, of the coming of the Elves and the captivity of Melkor. So if you've ever wondered how the board was set for all those epic tales of the First Age and beyond, you're definitely in the right place. Let's just kick things off with a question that gets right to the heart of Middle-earth. Where did the beautiful, immortal elves, and their darkest, most twisted counterparts, actually come from? The answer? It's tied to a time way before the sun and the moon even existed. A time of literal cosmic tension and catastrophic wars that completely reshaped the continents. Which brings us to Section 1, the starlit twilight. To really understand these origins, we need to look at the primordial state of the world long before the elves woke up. At this point in history, the world was completely divided. It was almost like two different realities. On one side, you have Aman, the uttermost west. This is where the god like Valar lived in this perfect, blissful light generated by the two trees. But on the other side, Middle-earth, and it was stuck in a perpetual, super dangerous twilight. It was only lit by these faint, distant stars. The growth of the world had basically hit pause, and dark, ancient creatures were just roaming the night-clad hills. The Valar almost never visited, which left Middle-earth incredibly vulnerable. And you know who took advantage of that? Melkor. While the Valar were resting in their glowing paradise, the original Dark Lord was busy. He wasn't sleeping. Instead, he was building a massive empire of monsters up in the north of Middle-earth. He gathered these corrupted spirits of fire, cloaked in darkness with literal whips of flame. Yep, the terrifying creatures we'd later call Balrogs. He holed them up in his massive fortress of Utumno. Oh, and he also built a second stronghold called Angband to guard against the Valar, putting it under the command of his chief lieutenant, a guy you might recognize by the name of Sauron. All right, Section 2, Awakening of the Firstborn. A prophecy ends up forcing the Valar into action, and it leads to easily the most magical moment in this entire history. The Valar knew the children of Iluvatar were destined to wake up, right? And they couldn't just leave them to wander around in Melkor's pitch-black wilderness. So, to prepare the way, the Vala named Varda takes on the greatest labor since the creation of the world. She basically creates a massive cosmic beacon. Taking silver dews from the glowing trees of Valinor, she kindles brand new, brilliantly bright stars in the sky. She sets up entire constellations, including a giant sickle of 7 stars in the north, as a direct, glowing challenge to Melkor. It was a signal that the time had finally come. And exactly as Varda finishes this immense work, under these brand new stars, the Firstborn finally awaken. They wake up beside a starlit lake in the far east of Middle-earth, a place called Cuiviénen. The very first thing their eyes opened to was that brilliant starlight above them. The very first sound they heard was water flowing over stone. Because of this, they were instantly filled with wonder and this deep, eternal love for both starlight and water. As they started to explore their world, they began naming the things around them. But most importantly, they named themselves the Quendi. This translates to those that speak with voices. You see, as they looked around this vast twilight world, they quickly realized they were the very first and only living things that could speak and sing. But here is where things take a really dark turn. Melkor commits his absolute most hateful deed. He actually discovered the elves before the Valar did. He sent shadows and evil spirits to spy on them, and if any elves wandered too far alone into the dark, well, they vanished. What actually happened to them? The wise believe they were dragged down into the dark pits of Utumno. There, through slow, just agonizing arts of cruelty, Melkor corrupted and enslaved them. This, tragically, is how he bred the horrific race of orcs, made purely out of envy and as a twisted mockery of the beautiful elves. Moving on to Part 3, the War of the Powers. Eventually, one of the Valar, Orome, accidentally discovers the elves while he's out hunting. He rushes the news back to Valinor, and once the Valar realize Melkor is out there hunting the Quendi, they know they have to step in, at all costs. This discovery sparks an apocalyptic clash. The Valar march on the north in full force for the sake of the elves. And guys, this isn't just a battle, it's a cataclysm that literally reshapes the continents. The earth shook, seas were widened, new bays were gouged out, mountains were pushed up. Finally, the Valar break through the gates of Utumno. Their champion, Tulkas, wrestles Melkor to the ground, and they bind the Dark Lord with a massive, unbreakable chain called Angainor. So Melkor is dragged back to Valinor blindfolded, and he's sentenced to prison in the impenetrable halls of Mandos for 3 long ages. Victory, right? Well, not exactly. The Valar make a critical, catastrophic error. In the rush, they fail to search the deepest, most deceitful vaults of Melkor's fortresses. Because of this oversight, many evil things, most notably Sauron, escape into the dark waste places of the world, just waiting for their moment. Section 4. The Great Summons. Now, with Melkor locked away, the Valar are faced with a massive dilemma. What on earth do they do with the elves who are just still sitting over in Middle-earth? This triggers a major debate in the Council of the Gods. Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, argues strongly that they should leave the elves in Middle-earth. Let them use their incredible skills to heal the broken world. But the majority of the Valar, they disagree completely. They're terrified for the elves' safety in the dangerous dusk of Middle-earth. And, to be totally honest, they are completely captivated by the elves' beauty. They kind of selfishly want the elves to come live with them in the glowing light of Aman. Whether it was selfish or protective, the majority wins out. The Valar officially summon the Quendi to pack up and move to Valinor forever. But right when the decision is made, Mondos, the Vala who oversees fate, breaks his silence and says just 4 chilling words. So it is doomed. It's an incredibly ominous moment. This single decision to uproot the elves basically sets the stage for all the tragic woes that follow in Middle-earth's history. Part 5. Sundering of the Elves. As you can probably guess, this controversial summons leads to a great schism that defines Elven history forever, because, understandably, not everyone wanted to leave their home. The Elves immediately split into 2 main factions. The Valar had brought 3 Elven ambassadors to Valinor first to see the light, and when they got back, they convinced many to go. Those who marched west became known as the Eldar. But a massive group of them just looked at the starlight, looked at the wide-open spaces of Middle-earth, and said, yeah, no thanks. They refused the summons entirely. They became known as the Avari, the unwilling. And just like that, the 2 groups were separated for ages. Now, those who did decide to march west were organized into 3 massive hosts of varying sizes. This started the absolute longest, slowest migration in history, led by the god Orome on his golden-shod horse. You had the Vanyar, who were the smallest group, the Noldor in the middle, and the Teleri, who were by far the largest group on the march. To keep all these names straight, just think of this quick breakdown. The Vanyar, led by Ingwe, were the fair elves. They were the absolute favorites of the high gods and the very first to reach the west. The Noldor, led by Finwë, were the deep elves. These were your ultimate craftsmen and scholars. And finally, that massive Teleri host. Honestly, they were kind of the procrastinators of the group. They loved water, dragged their feet, lingered on the road, and eventually became known as the Sea Elves. It's really important to remember that this journey wasn't just a quick walk in the park. It spanned uncounted leagues of pathless, terrifying wilderness. Dark clouds from the recent war were still blocking the stars in the north. It was so terrifying and took so long that even among the Eldar who started the march, many splintered off. For example, a huge group of the Teleri got absolutely terrified by the towering, terrible peaks of the Misty Mountains. They decided to follow a leader named Lenwë south down a great river instead, becoming the Nandor, just one of many groups that completely abandoned the journey. Ultimately, all of this fracturing sets up the entire political landscape for the later ages. From then on, Elven history judges its people by one fundamental metric. Did you see the light of the trees or not? Those who made it to the west are the Calaquendi, the Elves of Light. They gained incredible wisdom and power from living directly with the gods. But everyone else? The Avari, who refused? The Nandor? And the various groups that got lost, lingered, or turned away? They are the Moraquendi, the Elves of Darkness, who only ever knew the starlit dusk of Middle-earth. Which leaves us with one final, provocative question to wrap up this explainer. Look at the vast divisions among the elves. Look at the collateral damage to the very shape of the world. And look at the fact that Sauron was just left unchecked while the Valar retreated to their paradise with their new favorite companions. Considering absolutely all the tragedy that followed, was taking the elves away from Middle-earth the biggest mistake the gods ever made? Think about that for a bit. And hey, thank you so much for exploring this fascinating history with me today.